Have you ever told somebody something personal and afterwards you've thought, why the heck did I tell them that? Because I have. And the older I get, the more convinced I am that we've been sold this idea that being open is always good. Share your feelings. Tell people what's going on. Be vulnerable, be honest, and let people in. Well, not exactly. Not everybody deserves to know everything about you. And I've learned that some information, once you hand it over, you never get it back. People remember it and people judge you by it. And sometimes, let's be honest, people use it against you. So there are 5 things I've come to be more careful about sharing as I've gotten older. And number 5 is probably the one I wish I'd learnt years ago. The first one is what I'm going to do next. It's your plans, your next move, something you're excited about, something you're thinking of changing in your life. Maybe you're going to move and maybe you're going to go travelling. You're starting a new venture, something new. Maybe you've met somebody new, thinking about leaving somebody or whatever it is. I don't think everybody needs to know while you're still figuring it all out. Because the minute you tell people, suddenly everybody has an opinion. Oh, I wouldn't do that. Are you sure? That sounds a little bit risky to me. Why would you want to do that? And before you know it, something you were excited about has now got 12 other people's fears sitting on top of it. I think when we're younger, we often look for approval. We want people to say, that's a great idea, you go for it. But sometimes they don't. I've become much more inclined now to think, I'll do it first and then I'll share it later. Not because you're being secretive, it's not about that. It's because you're protecting something while it's still fragile. And if it works, well, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, you can quietly change your direction without having everybody asking, whatever happened to that thing you were going to do? Sometimes your next move needs to belong to you before it belongs to everybody else. And this leads straight into number 2, money, finances. How much you've got and how much you haven't got. And what you paid for something, that's a big one. And what you might owe, what you inherited, what you're spending. I think money is one of those subjects where people suddenly become very strange. You can be friends with somebody for 20 years and the minute money comes into the conversation, you see a completely different side of them. If people think that you've got more than they have, some people resent it. If they think you've got less, some people judge you for it. If they know you're struggling, some people start treating you differently. They blame you. And if you think you're comfortable, suddenly you might become the person who can pay for everything, the one who can lend money. If you've made some financial mistakes or things just went wrong, you don't need to be thrown back at you every 6 months. Remember when you spent all that money on such and such? Oh yes, I remember. I was there. Thank you for reminding me. I think by this stage of life, unless somebody generally needs to know your financial situation, well, they probably don't. Number 3, and this one might annoy some people, your deepest insecurities and fears. Now, I'm not saying walk around pretending you're perfect. God knows none of us are. I'm not saying you shouldn't have somebody you can talk to now and again. We all need that. But I'm no longer believing every friendship automatically earns access to the most vulnerable parts of you. Because when you tell somebody, I'm terrified of this, or I hate this about myself, or I'm a bit insecure about this, this is the thing that can really hurt me. You are giving them something incredibly personal. And if that relationship ever changes, they still have that information about you. That's the bit we don't think about when everything is going well. We think, I trust this person. And maybe you probably do, but friendships change, relationships change. People fall out with each other and families fall out. Something you shared during a moment of trust can suddenly come back at you during a moment when that person is upset or angry with you, and that hurts differently because they know exactly where to aim. So I think vulnerability needs to be earned. I don't think it should be automatic. I definitely don't think somebody deserves your complete openness simply because they've known you a long time. The length of time doesn't necessarily equal emotional safety. Some people have known us for years and still don't handle us with care. And there are two other things that I'm very reluctant and hesitant to talk to people about, and I guess we've all heard about this. People say it's impolite to talk about religion and politics, and I'm on board with that. When it comes to politics, a lot of people have extremely strong views, and if an argument can get heated, it can be a political argument. And I've got my views, but usually these days I just say to people, I'm not very politically minded. And partly that's true, but I still have my own views. If somebody is in line with me or aligned with me, then I'm much more willing to open up and discuss it. But when they have opposing political views to me, it's kind of like, well, politics can get heated. It can get downright nasty, and I don't need that additional conflict, so I step away. And the other thing is religion. Some people are much more religious than others, and that is their prerogative in life. And I'm not saying where I stand, but I'm just saying if that's your particular viewpoint and belief, I'm okay, but I don't really want to talk about it because I might have a very different belief. Chances are I do. And I don't really want to get into arguments about that either with people. And once again, people can get heated about that as well. And I certainly don't want anyone trying to push their beliefs onto me. I'm old enough to have figured this one out. And it's not because I haven't looked into it over the years. I did. I grew up in a particular mainstream religion, and it was great. When I was young, I even embraced it. I learned from it. I didn't stay with it though, and that was my choice. So when it comes to religion and spiritual beliefs, I've had friends that have got all sorts of different beliefs and spiritual practices. It doesn't mean I agree with them though, but it's the person I like and it's how they treat me. That's what matters most to me. So those are two topics that I don't share. If people choose to share them, well, that's up to them. I'm probably not the best person though for people to be sharing their strong political or religious views with. I'll probably just change the topic. Now I'm going to talk about oversharing. Oversharing is something that some of us do, and I have been guilty of this many times in my life. I've caught myself out and I've had to try and stop myself because I am a very open person and a reasonably honest person, but I've learned the hard way to hold back sometimes, to be selective. A lot of you on YouTube watch my videos and you tell me that's something you really like about me, how honest I am and how vulnerable I can also be. But I'm cautious. You don't realize this perhaps, but I don't tell you everything, and I don't need to tell you everything. I am protecting myself. There have been times on YouTube that I've said probably more than I've wanted to say. Nobody likes being judged, and honestly, if you're in an open forum like this, it's an international open forum. You're going to get judged. I know that. And it doesn't really hurt me that much because, well, I don't know everyone and they don't really know me. But in my life, I try to hold back sometimes because trust is built. We all hear that. We know that trust is built. And even sometimes when you think you trust somebody, they can let you down. We've all had things come back to bite us in the butt. And I've also learned in life, this has been a really tough one to learn. Sometimes it's the people closest to you that judge you the harshest. Sometimes it's the people closest to you that don't show you kindness. And that has really surprised me in my life. I've actually joined a couple of private forums on YouTube, the YouTube support groups. And I feel safer in these private groups with total strangers because that's the thing in life. Where we all say, unless somebody is going through what you're going through, experiencing what you're experiencing, they'll never fully understand you. And that's just true. And that's not their fault. That's just the way people are. How can we possibly feel something if we haven't experienced it? We can only imagine how it might feel. And so I've joined a couple of these groups where I know people have been through very similar experiences to me, and I have received incredible support. And I would honestly say that in one of these groups, the people are the least judgmental people I've ever come across. And I think sometimes that's the safest place for us to share our particular issue or problem. If we have in life, I think that go to the people who know what you've experienced. And yet I've done that also with another issue in my life. And if the people haven't had quite the same experience as you, if it hasn't been as bad or strong, it's just been different, even they sometimes don't really understand. And even they can judge you. People always have simple solutions for humans. We have simple advice and simple opinions. If you just do this, if you just do that, that's the answer. And the answer is often what they did. And they fixed it this way. Bang, one answer, one simple solution. Maybe they were lucky. Maybe. It doesn't always work that way though. And honestly, as far as Facebook, your Facebook profile, that's probably the worst place you can share your grievances. Some of your friends will understand and some of them just won't. And I've seen some bitter arguments on Facebook. I avoid it at all costs. I just don't need that conflict or stress in my life. And it's amazing how personal some people can become. Number 4, your relationship problems. Oh, this one. Yeah, so how many of us have done this? You have an argument with somebody and you're furious and upset and you ring your sister or somebody, your friend, and you tell them everything. He said this, she did that. You won't believe what happened. And at that moment, you mean every word of it. Then 3 days later, you've made up again. You've moved on. Everything seems fine again. But the person you told, they haven't moved on. They still remember what you said, and they still think that he's a bit of an idiot. And they think that she's treated you terribly. And now you're sitting there thinking, oh goodness, I probably shouldn't have told them all of that. Because when we're upset, we tell one side of the relationship, our side, the angry side. And it may be completely justified at that particular moment, but relationships are really complicated. And once you invite other people into every disagreement, they start forming opinions about the relationship that you have to live with. I'm not saying hide serious problems. Absolutely, that's not the idea. There are times when we do need some help, and there are times when we need another pair of eyes and ears, and there are times when something is generally wrong and you keep quiet, and that's the worst thing you could do. But every irritation, every argument, every disappointing thing somebody does, maybe not, because sometimes you repair the relationship, but the audience you created around the fight never forgets the performance. And then there's another side to all of this. When you tell too many people too many details about your relationship, suddenly everybody thinks they have to have a vote. And number 5, your regrets and your past mistakes. I think we've been encouraged to believe that telling people all the things we've done wrong somehow proves that we're authentic. And sometimes it does in a way. Sometimes sharing something you've been through can genuinely help somebody else. But I also think there are things we need to stop dragging around behind us. You did something 20 odd years ago. You chose the wrong person maybe. You stayed too long perhaps. You might have left too soon and you might have spent money stupidly. You didn't take the chance you wish you had of. You trusted somebody else you shouldn't have trusted. We have all screwed things up, but you don't have to keep presenting your old mistakes as evidence every time somebody wants to understand who you are today, Because the problem with telling people your old mistakes is that some people freeze you there. They'll remind you, usually when it's the least helpful. Well, remember what happened last time? Oh yes, I remember. I remember what happened last time. And that is precisely why I'm not the same person anymore. I think there comes a point where you have to let yourself graduate from your own past. You don't have to keep apologizing for who you were. You don't have to keep confessing to anyone. You don't have to explain every bad decision you've made, and you certainly don't owe everybody your entire history. I used to think openness automatically meant closeness. The more you tell somebody, the closer you become. And sometimes that can be true, but it's not always true. Sometimes oversharing just means somebody knows a lot more about you. That is not the same thing as knowing you. And it certainly isn't the same thing as caring about you. Real trust takes time. You watch what people do with the small things first. Do they gossip about everybody else? Because if they tell you everybody else's private business, guess what? They're probably doing that with yours. Do they bring things up later to embarrass people? Do they use somebody's insecurities against them? When they're angry and upset, do they enjoy knowing everybody's business? We should probably watch people more before we hand them the keys to every room in our lives. And I think there's something else that changes as you get older. You stop feeling quite so obligated to explain yourself. Why did you do that? Because I wanted to. Why aren't you telling anybody? Because I don't want to. What happened between you and so-and-so? Oh, that's private. How much did that cost? Well, just enough. What are you planning? I'll tell you when I've done it. We don't always need these enormous explanations about our life. Not everybody gets your whole story. There's a massive difference between being connected and being completely exposed. And I think that distinction becomes much clearer with age. You learn who can handle your truth, who can hear something private without making it about themselves, who doesn't use it as gossip or against you, who doesn't judge you, who doesn't store it away as ammunition for later. Have a great day, guys. And you take care of yourselves, and I'm going to see you in the next one.